Hello everyone and welcome back to another Strategoi video. Ryan here with yet another tournament report. We've got a weird one here in that this is our first doubles tournament that we've ever covered before, even though Nick, who's also on the call here, has played. This is our third doubles tournament thus far, Nick, is that right?
Yes, this is the third one.
Yeah, so I think for our very first one, it was definitely before I even Jonas and I had, I think even before Jonas had started the channel. And then the second one was before we'd really started doing tournament reports in earnest. So here we are, giving you a little bit more casual stuff in the midst of what's about to be a very competitive Worlds setting for those of you keeping track of kind of where the tournament scene is heading right now. But in the meantime, Nick, how are you doing? What's going on,
I'm do
man?
I'm doing great, like you said, getting ready for Worlds, focusing, and I had a great time with this one. It was a nice reprieve from taking things so seriously. So,
Yeah, 100%. You know, and I tried to find some art that had both KO and Gitz in it. And it's not obvious that it's, if you, on first glance, that this is more than just a KO photo, but there actually is a bunch of squig stuff going on here. There's a dead squig there too, which,
oh,
uh, which
perfect.
this is a little bit of foreshadowing, not only for what we brought to this doubles tournament, but for what our last matchup looked like. So felt like it was pretty appropriate. Before I go any further, though, for everyone that's used to the normal YouTube stuff, if you could like, subscribe, and comment below, join the Discord. All that stuff helps boost the signal and get the video out to more people out there. Without further ado, for our summary here, we're going to be doing our normal kind of format here of a tournament review, our army lists, our matchups, and then, of course, some concluding thoughts. And since this is a more casual thing, I think we'll just have a good time with this video and not worry too much about the technical details of everything. All right, so moving on to the rules pack, meta, and experience. As for the rules pack, for those that aren't too familiar, doubles is, as we've already alluded to, a very casual format. Instead of what you see with teams, where you'll have a 4 or 5 or maybe even 8-person team, as you see at Worlds, where each player works together with their total kind of combined victory point scores or tournament point scores, but isn't actually playing together. Doubles consists of one team where two players are splitting 2,000 points, so each one gets 1,000 points, and they're playing simultaneously against two other people. So it makes it much more of kind of a beer and pretzels type Warhammer experience as opposed to something super competitive. Um, and at this tournament, we had 16 teams of two players, so obviously 32 people. And then it was just a one-dayer, so 3 games. Nick, have you ever seen or heard of a doubles tournament that's like a GT, like a 5-game, 2-day kind of deal?
No, I haven't. It's only ever been one dayers,
Would
which
you
I think
find
makes a little more sense.
would you find that compelling to do a 2-dayer, or is that overkill?
I would probably do it once, maybe, and just see how it goes. Because the thing is, it's like I like the one dayer because it's fun and silly. And like you said, it's a bit different from what you're typically used to. And then trying to figure out exactly how the rules interact with each other and really, just making it work and shoehorning in things to make sense. I feel like 5 might just drag on where I'm like, all right, I'm over it at this point. I like a sweet spot of just for a day go in and have some fun.
Right. You know what's interesting about that is we're going to be playing with Jonas and Hank in Bruges coming up in, I think, October at a teams tournament, a 4-person teams tournament. But it's a one-dayer, which is kind of the opposite, the other way around here. Whereas casual kind of doubles fits best by a one-day tournament. I'd say teams fits better by a 2-day tournament, right? Doesn't that seem like if you're going to get those people together and be strategic about everything, it's probably better if you have more rounds so that it can kind of fully play out and everything? Would you agree with that, or do you think a one-day teams tournament is totally normal?
I've never seen a one day teams tournament. I mean, you can do it. I just think like the level of competitiveness is maybe a little bit less, especially because you can't really recover from a shit pairing. So if you get a team that just counters you on all levels, then you didn't really match that well. There's not a whole lot you can do to recover in a one day, or 2-1, you're not really going to break the top. But with a 2-dayer, you can get in 4-1 and still maybe make podium depending on everybody else. So
Sure.
I would prefer a 2-day with the teams tournament. Just it feels a little bit better.
Right. So you'd kind of alluded to the fact that doubles tournaments are weird in how the rules play out, in the sense that everyone that we've been to, I think, had a slightly different rules pack which concerns like exactly how the two armies interact. Because obviously you have two generals, you have a full set of command traits and all kinds of things, but each one of the doubles tournaments we've gone to has had different rules. And you've actually played a fourth one I forgot about with you and Luke when I was out of town. So you've played one more doubles tournament than I have. And I think that had a different rules pack than the one we'd previously played, even by the same tournament organization. So, what are some thoughts on these kind of like bended rules we have to make that GW doesn't actually publish because doubles isn't an official format? Do you have any kind of like feedback on that, or like this?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so the one that you actually didn't go to, I think, did it the best, where they wrote their own battle tactics and grand strategies that were catered to a doubles, which I think helps a lot, and it simplified the game a lot easier. So I actually preferred that of if you take the effort and the time to kind of make your own rules pack and battle tactics, so then you can sort of cut out a lot of the time spent while you're playing to figure out exactly how these interact, and calling a T over and saying, does this work this way, or who's getting how many CPs do we get? And I think even during the day we were just like, all right, forget it, we're playing it this way.
Exactly.
So it was a little hard to keep up with that. So yeah, like you said, each one did it a little bit differently, and then it's interesting to see if you lessons learned from each one, you can create the best version of doubles. So yeah, I think the custom made ones, I think, is probably the best way to go. Yeah, or at least the simplest.
What's interesting about that is in thinking about the different rules packs we've seen for how they want these doubles rules to interact with one another, as opposed to the normal official rules for match play. Sometimes you see people complaining about the GHB changes all the time, and why do I have to follow the current version of how the game's supposed to play with match play? Why can't we just do it by whatever we find, house rules or whatever? And there's a reason standardization is good, because if you're listening back to something like this, or you're trying to take anything away from it, as much as like I've enjoyed every single doubles tournament we've played, the fact that each one of them had different rules makes it hard to compare the two experiences in terms of like what was even going on. Like, for example, in this one, something that was new. It's not usually new to say that you can't duplicate war scrolls or command traits or whatever, but they also made you choose a general, like an overarching general for, like, let's say this one's mine, or if the general dies, then you get a CP. We also had to share CPs, so you weren't getting double the amount. Grand strategy, we had to share a grand strategy, and these kinds of things aren't consistent from tournament to tournament. And so I almost feel like it's silly to mention it, because a lot of the people who are going to be listening to this probably aren't playing doubles tournaments all that often, and I don't want to give the impression that this is how all doubles tournaments play out. Whereas when we talk about normal, like 1 day or 2 day or singles tournaments or teams tournaments, even those rules are pretty standardized. Even, okay, fair, GW doesn't make the teams rules, but almost every teams tournament I've played at has followed the AO or like World's rules in general. It's in the neighborhood of something that's considered a organizing body, their version of the rules. So I don't know. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to say here is that there's this kind of a weird backdoor argument for why having consistent rules is good for the community.
Yeah, I think it helps, and then I think one of the other things that really stood out about this one, opposed to the other doubles games that we played, is that this one actually allowed you to have both people from the same army, so the same faction, which was the only one double that I've ever been to that allowed that. So I think one team was full Nighthawk, which was interesting.
Yeah, that's worth pointing out. Yeah.
And then on a broader scale, when it's not a doubles tournament, I think the only variability that I really see is that when it comes to terrain. So different terrain rules and things like that. But for, like you're saying, it's pretty consistent throughout, which I think eliminates the variables or some of the variables in terms of skill or determining who's going to take that podium, because it's not random. Like I think we talked about it in one of our previous reviews. It's like when you're playing on your home turf, you typically will do a little bit better because you're used to your own metas and things like that. So if you can eliminate as many variables as you can as you throughout like the tournament scene, you can start to make a truly competitive environment where it just comes down to skill.
Yeah, and to be clear, what I'm saying is not like shitting on any particular organizer that's doing a double.
Why do you do this to him?
Yeah, on a doubles tournament at all. Like this is actually. I think doubles is fun in that it is looser. It's a looser rule set. At the same time, it's unfortunate that GW hasn't picked up and said, "Hey, we recognize that doubles exists. Why not, like, we'll throw our 2 cents in on how you should do doubles, and then that can become kind of a standard basis, That would be kind of cool to see in a GHB or in a PDF that's free for everyone, So,
yeah, leaning into the casual play a little bit more.
Sure. So missions, we did use normal missions. It was Jaws, ours for the taking, and Position over Power. Do you feel like these missions made a big impact on our list writing or list choices or, anything really? Or was it just yeah.
For you and I, no. I think we both knew pretty much what we were going to bring, and it didn't really matter which ones. At a minimum, we're like, we got enough GCs, and we're like, yeah, I think we're covered. And that was it. That was pretty much what we did, and then it didn't matter which battle plan we were going to play.
Yeah.
So I know I didn't give it too much thought. I kind of glanced at it and went, yeah, this list will do fine.
Yeah. And then it was, as per normal, it was scoring based on a victory point difference. Though this tournament, I think you told me that with the exception of maybe Battle Lines Drawn, which is one of the, or no, which one's the one where you can get extra battle tactics if you, like you can do 2 battle tactics in a turn or something like that. That's,
yeah,
I forget what that one's called. They keep changing these things so fast, but that one allows for a bigger point swing. And then I guess there's the other one that allows you to get 2 points, 2 points, 1 point. So you could get 7 per round. I think in those two, it might be mathematically possible to have gotten a 20-0 at this tournament because
Path of a Champion, by the way.
Path of a Champion. Thank you.
Yeah.
But it's a I guess the differential system they had at this tournament was a 30-point difference or so that you needed to have in order to get a 20-0. Is that right?
Yeah, it was something absurdly high that like it wasn't possible. Like you really were mathematically on a lot of these battle plans you couldn't do it, which I thought was interesting. I think we had one of those instances where it was like, how did you manage a 20-0? Like you can't score that many points.
Right.
So then some people were did a little oopsie daisy and had to recalculate. But yeah, it was probably one of the biggest differential systems I've seen.
Yeah, I think I've seen one that's that big before, but it's I think more of a 20-0. Like literally, if there's a 20-point difference between your victory points, then that's usually when it kicks in. But maybe I have it wrong. I don't. It changes a little bit from tournament to tournament. All right, so moving on. We keep referencing the tournament itself, but this was the White Scars group, kind of in a more port village in the neighborhood of Rotterdam that's called Alblasserdam. And this is my second time at one of their tournaments. It's run by our buddy Neil, who's a lovely dude. And then his group of guys at White Scars, which is their club. They also have a YouTube channel, from my understanding, so check that out if you guys get a chance. But it's always a fun time down there. Nick, this was your first time down there, right?
Yeah, very first time. I wasn't able to go last time because I think I either got sick or I was on holiday or something like that. I missed it.
Yeah. They've got, and we can talk about this more under experience, but they're kind of known for their food and then the service. I really like that the servers come around to you when you're playing instead of you having to go seek out beer and stuff like that. It's basically in the basement, a nice basement of a hotel that's kind of like bed and breakfast-esque. And it's got a good vibe. I really like being there. Everyone was definitely in a good mood considering it was kind of a casual thing. Like I say here, a player base is largely casual in a doubles format, and there are a lot of new faces. That's also a nice thing about doubles is that it kind of brings out a different set of people. Did you feel like you knew a lot of the people there this time?
Yes, I think I knew more than half. So everyone was more or less a familiar face.
Yeah.
Maybe not by name, but I had seen them before.
Yeah, there were definitely people I'm not used to seeing. But it's also kind of like based off of geography too. Maybe that was more of a Rotterdam group than we see at some other things.
Yeah.
As far as the meta, obviously when talking about doubles, the meta technically would be which two armies are paired together. That would be the army. So 1,000 points of, let's say, like for us, Gitz, and 1,000 points of KO. Interestingly, we weren't the only army doing that, and that'll foreshadowing will come back to bite us later. There were two armies that were doing Gitz KO, and then there were also two doing Stormcast Sylvaneth, which is kind of interesting. What do you think there is about like what do you think brought people together for a Stormcast Sylvaneth build?
Um. Hmm.
It's kind of
I don't remember what they actually had. I don't remember seeing their list, so I would have to know the models of why they would bring that together. But
yeah, fair.
if they went like a tree, I don't even could get really any trees in there that much. Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to look at it.
Yeah,
I mean,
I would
if I
switch.
saw the list, I'd be able to tell you what their plan was. But
I should have sent you a copy of the list. I can't switch screens because we're recording my screen right now. But I think, I mean, again, it was relatively casual. My guess is that the Sylvaneth was for the mobility and the Stormcast was for the tankiness. But I think one of the Stormcast armies at least had a number of Fulminators or Paladors or something like that. Some more cavalry-esque stuff. So it could have just also been people that like each other and those are the armies they play. So. That's also there. What were you saying?
I was saying that maybe with the Fulminators, I was in my head of maybe using Sylvaneth as some screening as well, and then just hammering down with Stormcast. But
right,
yeah.
and Stormcast isn't very good at magic anyway. So Sylvaneth, you put a war song back there, let him do the thing, and then Stormcast goes and kind of cleans up. Isn't so bad either. But as you mentioned, we actually saw Night Haunt the most because one of the teams, actually a married couple, Nard and Marika, played together as Night Haunt. Now, the rules are that you can't duplicate War Scrolls or command traits, abilities, that kind of thing. That was one half of the Night Haunt representation there, and then we had a couple normal one half of an army played Night Haunt. We played against a Night Haunt opponent, which we'll talk about more later. And spoiler, the team of Nard and Marika that played double Night Haunt, they ended up placing really well. So what do you think it is? Do you think playing like 2,000 points worth of the same army, even if you have no War Scroll duplicates and they can't use each other's abilities, like their buffs don't overlap, do you feel like that's still really strong, or do you think it's better to diversify with two totally different traits? Obviously, we ended up doing well, and we weren't playing the same army double. So.
Yeah, I don't know if one is inherently better than the other, but it definitely helps if, like, let's say, for example, one player has a little bit more experience and skill and can really guide the other in that army. So I don't know how practiced they are with Night Haunt. I know Nard is pretty strong with Night Haunt as well, so if he can really general the whole thing. But also, I think if you build each one differently to do, like, cater to a certain unit and you don't duplicate your War Scrolls between the two, so you have like Harridans or something else, and the other side Blade Guys, and then you put the associated heroes in those two different groups, you still have a very strong plan there.
Sure, I can say that Marika is a good player. She beat me with her Night Haunt at a tournament.
Then even better.
A Bloodstorm tournament a while ago. So and Night Haunt's a good army. So as long as they get the right matchups. So
yeah.
We also saw 3 times Lumineth, KO, and Seraphon. I was surprised to see so much Seraphon there, one of which even had the Dread Saurian, the big guy, which was, I think, the last time they could officially use that model, because the update came through the GHB not disallowing the Monstrous Arcanum. And then we saw 2 Stormcast cities, Zinj, Khorne, Gitz, and Ironjaws. Not present at all were, interestingly, Dock, Fireslayers, Ideneth, Beasts, Skaven, Feck, Ogre Maw tribes, Suns, and the rest of Oryx that aren't Ironjaws. Does any of that surprise you?
I would have expected some Beasts, to be honest.
Yeah. Beast do you think Beast fits in a more casual format, though? Like those people own Beasts? Because I feel like Beast has either been super casual at one point, but not really in a long time, or has been super competitive once they got the Rend, and maybe that's just not something that type of player leans to.
Maybe. I feel like there's enough beasts in the community right now that they could have maybe borrowed some. So it's there. While it was mainly casual, there are still competitive players there that we recognize from the singles tournaments like scene. So I'm still surprised that I didn't see any beasts. Like I would expect that.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of the people we did see that were there, though, were that are familiar with the competitive scene. Were playing armies that aren't their typical armies.
Yeah.
So, like for example, Agnes was playing. She usually plays Iron Jaws or Seraphon, I guess, recently, but she was playing Lumineth that day. She was the team captain, the former team captain of Team Nederland, the Netherlands here. So definitely a good player. And she had switched it up to Lumineth, which I didn't even know she had a Lumineth army. So, and then like Terry was playing. He was one of the reserve players, I think, last year.
Yeah.
He was playing well, it wasn't actually Skaven; it was KO, but with Skaven
Oh, that's
models.
right.
But yeah, there were some people that were definitely mixing it up a bit. It was cool seeing everyone kind of come and bring things a little less competitive than normal, except for us. Speaking of which, moving on to the experience. So, and this first comment here that it was solid food selection and service. This kind of taps into what I'd already mentioned about just how that hotel and how those events tend to play out. Uh, did you have anything else to add to kind of the presentation or Neil's part in the tournament?
Yeah, I thought it was really good. It lived up to my expectations. So, like I said, I missed the last time that everyone was there, but I got the photos of the food, and I was like, oh man, I'm really missing Neil. And then Neil is an entertainer, so he likes to put on a good show. He likes to be a part of it, and just have a good time. So I expected that sort of vibe throughout, and little. Giveaways and fun shit throughout the day, which is exactly what happened. So
Right.
it very much lived up to the
Right.
expectations, and I had a great time.
And trying to hawk dice on people.
Yeah, love it.
There's a game. There's a game that they played at the end for like a giveaway where you needed to have a die to be able to participate. But a lot of people had already packed up, and Neil was like, "Well, you could always buy one of our dice that's standing sitting here," which is very
See, supply and demand. He's
right.
creating the demand.
Right. So another comment that I put here in quotes was the world's guys, eye roll included.
Yes.
This is the first time I've had this experience, but evidently there was some hubbub going about us, and no one wanted to play against us. And like some people were even like frequently snickering during the day, like, "Oh, the world's guys, oh, whatever," for referring to both of us, even though.
Yeah.
There were other competitive lists there for sure, and we weren't the only Gitz KO army. So it was kind of funny. Like I'm looking back on it now as like kind of cute. But yeah, what did you think about that? Do you usually get that kind of reception when you go to a tournament? Like you're already kind of picked to be in the podium?
No, never. I laughed at it too, like especially when. Henry, one of the guys on the world's team support, was like just making fun of us the whole time. He's like, "Yeah, you come to this casual thing and you just do this," and it made me laugh a little bit. But at the same time, the result would have been or our pairing would have been what it was. Like we always do doubles together. So worlds or not, we were gonna do this. So.
Yeah, we can tell the story about why we went there a little bit later, but when we talk about the list. But that's not always what we do when we go to doubles. But thus far at doubles, we've always done at least 2-1. So, and then how did you and Luke do? Do you remember?
I think we went 0-3. I don't think we won anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that experience was a weird day for various reasons, but you guys had a good time, and I know you got to play against Tom too, right?
Yeah, it was Tom and Kai. We pulled ourselves out of the pairing system to just play against them.
Yeah.
Because we were already both like 0-2, so we're like, let's just have some fun.
Yeah, exactly. That's always a good way to round it out. Okay, so personal experience, we ended up going 3-0, as we're alluding to here. We'll talk more about results later. But we did have a rough mirror match in that last round where we had to play not exactly our list, but similar enough that it was an uphill battle for sure. And we'll talk about the drama of that matchup later. And as we've said already, our army selection was definitely cutthroat. We were not
It's underselling it just a touch.
Yeah, we were not going in with like, oh, let's just put some war hydras on the field and see what happens. Uh, we like, let's put it this way. Nick brought like the creme of the creme, creme de la creme of his world's army, and even though I didn't bring my Lumineth, I did bring the creme de la creme of the other army I was considering for worlds. So and that I had a lot of experience with. So it played out about as we expected, I think. But we'll talk more about it later. And in general, it was a very nice day and a change of pace from Worlds training, which Nick said earlier. Anything else you want to add for personal experience here, Nick?
Yeah, I think while the list was definitely cutthroat, I at least maybe I'll speak on my own behalf. As I tried to put a lot of effort in to not make it a bad time for our opponents. Like I tried to keep it fun and light. It ended the way that it ended, but I wasn't trying to walk around and be like, yeah, we're gonna kick your ass. Like none of that. It's just like, well, let's have some fun, see what happens.
Yeah, and that's both of our personalities though. Like if I'm playing a really strong competitive list, I often buy people beer or like am like apologizing the whole time for how like not fun it is to play against. Because like at the end of the day, I really am trying to have a good time with the people I'm standing across from, and I feel like that was successful at this tournament too. The last game got a little tense, but like
Yeah.
overall was, I mean, and that was deserved. It was the top table and was against a very competitive list, so it made sense that it got a little tense. But in general, yeah, you were dancing and like we were playing music and trying to be positive, where
Yeah.
possible. So I think that's a good point. All right, so moving on to the list itself, and we can talk about how we came up with our list here. I've named it. This isn't our official name, but for lack of for more explanation, I'm just going to call it Drunk in Antwerp. Nick, do you want to explain why it's called Drunk in Antwerp?
Yes. So we went to Antwerp and we took our significant others with us just to kind of hang out, see the city, and just hang out in general. We were sitting at dinner, I believe it was, or just grabbing a drink after many drinks, and we were talking about what should we play? Do we want to keep doing our narrative story that we did at the other tournaments? And then there was just like kind of a pause, and I put my drink down and I looked at you and I was like, let's just fuck shit up. And then we just started laughing, and I was like, what's the worst thing I could bring? And then we crafted this atrocious abomination for a doubles tournament, and then laughing the whole time, like, yep, that definitely sucks.
Yeah, because the idea is that basically squigs, I mean, I complain about it all the time, but you have a super high wounds count and it's really hard to like deal with them. And then you were going to be the second wave. I was going to go in with my melee boat assault where I just go in and delete everything that like you didn't want to have to handle. And I'm also super flexible, like teleporting or flying fast and getting around in general. So what's interesting is I ended up playing a much more auxiliary role than I thought I would. I thought I would, in my mind, I thought I'd be flying in there and like deleting the first half of the army, and then you cleaning up the rest. But what it turned out to be often was that I would go flank them and clean up the weak flank so that we could just start scoring points. And then I would come in and obliterate the rest as needed in the middle of the game. But I usually started a little more subtly than I usually do with this list because I knew you weren't going anywhere. You weren't going to have a problem, and a lot of people weren't putting all of their eggs into one basket trying to deal with me. They were like, so I would just be off to the side and be like, oh, okay, that's interesting, and then they'd go after you, and then of course you would do what you do. But let's talk a little bit more about the list. Obviously, fitting a doubles list onto one slide here is a little weird. So I've got Nick's list on the left, mine on the right. For sub-faction, it was Jaws of Mork for the Squigs bonus on charge. Mine was Bark Zone for the +1 to hit and wound for all my units on the charge. So very melee-oriented. The grand strategy was take what's theirs. We don't get to share, or we don't get to each have one. But take what's theirs was obvious. Triumph was Indomitable, which was chosen for Nick's Gitz not running away, which is the only way to protect that squig herd from battle shock, right?
Yeah.
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 And then obviously we have my article amendment and footnote, which was basically the normal things that I choose for this list for extra movement for the boat, a once per turn 2d6 run, and a once per game 3d6 charge at 18 inches if you want, which kind of guarantees that I get my one boat in. But yeah, actually, I'll just, while I'm talking about it, I'll talk about my list real quick. The one big thing I changed here was I just went full on melee. So this is basically half of what I usually play with this army. You got the frigate carrying a total of 9 guys. I mean, sorry, 9 normal guys plus 3 heroes, and that's the max it can carry. And the frigate does all kinds of mortal wounds and lets them step out and strike first. I took the Sky Wardens in 3 separate units of 3 so that they could each do their mortal wound, like the what's it called, the timed bombs or whatever at the end of combat. Although that often wasn't necessary, and then they could retreat and fly away, do some mortal wounds on the way out. And obviously, if you double up one of those units, then it still only triggers per unit. So this way, I got 3 chances to do it. The Admiral is just a beast. He's got the command trait that lets the boat move a bit extra in the at the end of the enemy movement phase, which we definitely took advantage of. An artifact that turns off ward saves, and then leadership of the Alpha if I needed to have 3 units redeploy back into boats or whatever. And then 2 Injury Masters on foot, even though they don't have a shooting profile. They heal the boat, but that's not the main thing they're doing. They're just really good in combat. Like, they're like mini admirals. And one of my Injury Masters was kind of a VIP for my half of the army.
So was.
And we'll talk about that when we get to it. But that guy ended up pulling a lot of weight towards the end of our last game. And then everything was in a battle regiment, as was everything in Nyx, so that we were as low as you can possibly be at a doubles tournament, at least in this format, which was a 2-drop. Nick, tell us about your list.
Yeah, so like you said, Jaws and Morg to get the +1 attack on the charge. My general was a madcap. I had Master of Magic, which I totally forgot until now, so that could have helped. And then the artifact, which is the Moonface Mommet, which is a -1 to an enemy unit save while they're within 12 inches. I paired this with Tunnel Master and the spell Hand of Gork, so potentially on those critical moments, the idea was I'll teleport him in, use the Mommet, Ryan charges, he's got his Ren, and that unit is -1 to their save, so we're really just, wombo comboing them out of oblivion. And then if it doesn't work or something's getting dicey, I can Tunnel Master myself away. Then I got Scraggy, whose main contribution was his War Scroll spell, so really sniping heroes and just being an overall nuisance. Then I got Ginkgo, which is his only service is making things fight on death. Yeah, it's Green Gravenite. I don't like that name. So I think from the last video I explained this. So I park him next to the herds and then let him fight on death. It's really, really effective. And then I've got 36 Squig herds, 12 Squig herd, and then the Loon Court that just comes with Ginkgo.
Right. Remind me, I forgot to put how many points 36 and 12 Squig herd are. And I misspelled Tunnel Master.
The herd is 390. The 12 is 130.
Okay. So there we go. So we were basically investing in like units that do what they want to do really well. Efficiency is kind of the name of the game with this. How many wounds? I think you had 124 wounds or something like that in your list. So
yeah, disgusting, and that's not considering bringing them back with the shrine.
Right, and so you see here, I just combined all of our stats at the bottom. We were 15 points under from a full 2,000, 175 wounds, which is so many. You'll never see that in KO, so that was definitely coming from your end. 80 bodies and 70 models. We only had 2 reinforcements, and it was a 2-drop. So it's a pretty nasty combo. Do you feel like if we brought this again to another one, it would have a very, very similar outcome?
Yeah, in its current state. So I don't know what, like, let's say a new GHB or the new books coming out, but I think right now this would be very, very strong still.
Yeah.
Until they spike the Squig herd points up even more.
Yeah, the Squig are. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think what would be fair enough, keep the points where they are and put them back on 1 wound apiece, because they're like the Riders. When you look at the Bounders or the other ones, they're each 1 wound from, like all cavalry, 1 wound from the Squig and 1 wound from the Rider, giving them 2. But these guys are by themselves on a 25 millimeter base, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like that would like level the playing field, and you could even drop the points if you wanted a little bit, and then put them down to 1 wound apiece. That would make a huge change in how they play out. But I don't know if they'll have the balls to do a whole War Scroll rewrite like that. But Anyway, that would seem fair to me. And then it would put us back into the realm of reasonable for our wounds count. But
Yeah.
anyway, okay, let's move on to the matchups. So our buddy Henry was playing a very Beast of Nurgle heavy list, so I went with acute Beast of Nurgle here on the left-hand side. He was playing 7 of these guys plus a list that very much leaned into them, so I figured why not. And Henry, for what it's worth, Henry and Jan were our first matchup, and they ended up winning the best sportsmanship because they're just such lovely guys. And they didn't like playing our list, but we were already friends, and it was nice to get to hang out with them as the start of the day.
And I feel like that's a statement for everybody that played our list, to be honest.
What?
No one liked playing against it.
Yeah. Well, our last matchup
they
was
didn't want to do it either. We were talking to them at lunch.
Yeah, but they deserved it. I mean,
it's true.
As we did.
They earned it.
You're right, exactly. So our team name is Second Time Lesson, which is another inside joke that we have. Nick and I tend to make a new joke every time we go out of town. We don't necessarily need to explain this one, but it's become our official team name whenever it's just the two of us. So
yep.
So our first matchup was all chaos god Nurgle and Slanesh matchup. Like I said, it was like Horticulus Slimux or whatever his name is, the hero. Which is named, I believe. So he didn't have a GC on that list. He could summon one. I think he summoned a Sloppity at some point. And he had double Narmaws just from the get-go, and then could summon more if he needed. And then our buddy Jan was playing a bunch of Hedonite Mortals. But we basically tabled them by the end of 3, I think. Is that the case? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was pretty much over at 2, but we kept playing it out anyways because we had a lot of time, so we're like, let's just finish.
Yeah. So, but it was lovely playing against the guys. This was one of those fast ones where it was more about the friendship. And to be fair, is also I believe Jan's first time playing Slanesh, so he wasn't 100% in the rhythm of using the temptation dice, and I think that could have made a difference. I think we still would have had a win, but I don't know if it would have been so feel baddy if that had gone off the way it can with Slanesh. So
in this one, I think you pretty much took care of the Beasts of Nurgle because they split basically right side, left side with Beast on one side and Slanesh on the other. So we counter deployed to that, where I went for the Slanesh because I just had the weight of dice to get through, and also he put a couple Beasts over there, so I picked them off. But then I remember you charged in, and then I looked over and everything was gone. I'm like, all right, well.
Right. Yeah. It took a little longer to kill those beasts than I thought it would, though. It was not. It was not just wiped out from the get-go. My favorite move that I got to make in this one was actually using I think Jan was planning on shooting me with his bliss barbs with the boat, but he didn't come within 12 inches at the end of his movement phase, so I just moved out of range. And then flanked on the other side, and that ended up proving to be, like one of those things. It's like I always warn people about what can happen, but it's so easy to forget that that's a thing, or that can be a feel bad. So, but yeah. I mean, ultimately, I had a good time with this game, and they weren't coming to play like super competitively anyway. They were just trying to have a good time, I think. So we might have rained on that parade, but at least get the bad matchup out of the way at the beginning, right?
Yeah, but like you said, it was still very fun. We were joking around a lot with them, and a lot of laughs to be had from that game.
Definitely. Okay, and then matchup number 2 was a kind of a rematch for you from the last time you played teams, or doubles.
Yes.
This was Yordi and Roy. If I'm not mistaken, they're brothers, actually, or at least related. They have the same last name. We didn't talk about that, but I think that's the case. We see these guys sometimes at the H2O club for tournament or practice nights, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, they live kind of near us. Everyone, I think one of them lives in Amstelveen, just south of Amsterdam, and then the other one lives actually not too much further away, I don't think. So maybe in Amsterdam itself. But so it's a kind of a local matchup here. Yordi was playing Night Haunt, and Roy was playing Blades of Corn. Um, the corn list was basically just a super tinky. It was a Juggernauts with the Juggernaut hero. I think they had the Realmgore Ritualist in the list too, and then a Bloodthirster, the Boomthirster actually, which I've got a slide later that kind of depicts what he got to do when he came back. He summoned one in with Blood type points at the end, and then you ended up. I kind of went up against Corn, and you went up against the Nighthaunt. So maybe it's better for you to talk about what was going on in that matchup. But I know it was a bunch of Grimgas guys and then a standard selection of 3 heroes, like the Cruciator or whatever, and a couple other guys. I always forget the names of the Nighthaunt characters.
Yeah.
But do you want to talk about what ended up happening with your end of the game on your front?
Yeah. So with this one, we kind of agreed that it made more sense for you to go into the corn, and I would send you the shaman so that you get the extra, -1 at the save, so you can start peeling through those. And then we put all the weight of dice into the Nighthaunt. I think we gave them turn, and then they launched those Nighthaunts right into my face, which we were fine with. I was like, okay, we're going to trade now. So he launched them into my 36 Squig Herd. I had Ginkgo parked behind him, so I got them to fight on death. So I think he lost 1 or 2 units just from fighting me. And then I mortal wounded off some heroes from Battle Shock and then brought them back in our turn. And then, again, I think he was out by turn 1 or 2. All of his Nighthaunt was dead because I think he overcommitted a little bit. And the Squig Herd swallowed him. And then we just had to, once I cleaned that up, we were shifting focus to the corn. But at that point, we had pretty much control of the board. So it was a quick turnaround.
Yeah. It's always a feel bad with. That's the problem with doubles is that it can happen. For those that don't know, you still kind of have to play I go you go. I mean, it's not necessarily that, but you're not supposed to move simultaneously and be working at the same time. So there's a lot of standing around, and this is actually a big lesson that I took with me as we'll alluding to the next game. But what can happen? What can be brought to the table by having one of you get mostly knocked out? Yeah, it kind of sucks that you have to stand around, but if you guys have a kind of a rhythm working together, I know that these guys have played together before and obviously are related. Being out doesn't necessarily mean you're out. You're just not moving models anymore. And so, that's always kind of a bit of a bummer, I think, when you get knocked out of a tournament like this, and then there's still more to go with your colleague that you're playing with. But like you said, it was basically me versus Corn at the end. You obviously came in to also do some work. Killed the first Bloodthirster, and then he brought one back, and then he ended up Boomthirsting. If he had gotten one more round of fighting off, he would have killed pretty much all of my heroes. Because that Boomthirster, for people that don't know, it's got 4 or 5 melee attacks, and if any of the to wound rolls are 6s, it does 4 mortal wounds to every enemy unit within 8 inches of the model, which is crazy. And of course, if I've got all my dudes in a boat, it's just peeling guys off left and right. So we got pretty lucky that I didn't die, but we already had the momentum at that point. And I think I was glad for a doubles game that's supposed to feel more Timmy-esque that Roy was able to bring that guy back in and let him do his thing,
Yeah, definitely. It was a cool moment because I think it was either do that or shake hands. And he was like, no, I'm going to bring this thing in. And I was like, yeah, do it. And then he brought it in and he did work with it. I was like, all right, cool. And then we immediately killed it right after. But it was cool to see.
Yeah. But definitely had a nice time. This is my first time playing with the guys, and they were really sweet to me. And I look forward to catching up with them at the next thing I see them at. All right, so the big last matchup. We were kind of eyeing what our potential matchups could have been. I think there was a cities list with a bunch of Iron Drakes that might have come up. What else was looking possible that we might have to go up against that wasn't Gitz KO?
It was there was the potential for the Thunder's Iron Jaws list. Or I'm sorry, not Thunder's, the Iron Drakes.
Yeah, that was the cities list I was just talking about.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Then there was the potential double Nighthaunt. Was right on our tail.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think those were the only ones that were potentially going to come up against us.
Right. So at a one-dayer, when you play, when you're 2-0 going into the last one, it doesn't necessarily mean you're playing at the top table, whatever that means. But I mean, because if you do 2-1 and you haven't scored high points, you could still place kind of like seventh or eighth. You could be out of the podium easy just by being 2-1. That said, one of the top three players um, was ended up being a 2-1, one of the podium people, just because they scored enough points. So they were the best performing 2-1, and there were 2-3-0s at the tournament, if I'm not mistaken. Um,
Yeah.
but we ended up, as karma would play out, and we've alluded to already, we played against our mirror match, which wasn't exactly the same. Now, I've written that the Gitz list was Bounders instead of Squig Herd, a bunch of Stabbers. It still had Scragrod in it, and then it had one unit of like the Stone Trogus, the Rock Gut or whatever they're called. What did you think about kind of this Gitz list? Do you like this is not as kind of feel baddy as yours, right?
It can be. So he had all the right buffs to really make an impact with the Bounders, and then the Stabbas to like lock down objectives, and also a very, very powerful screen because they're going to make you -1 to hit if you're within range of a netter in that unit.
Yeah.
So that could be a really detrimental. And then the Trogs to park them there, and then it's very hard to move them if you don't have the rend, and then they're also sitting on the ward. And then in their favor, in this particular case, there's 2 Scragrods, which means there's 2 rounds of that moon not moving. So they're always going to be under it, which means they're going to be rallying. His other units can rally better, and then, get a better save. So it's just, it can be pretty rough.
Yeah, so that was Rob who was playing them, and then John was. These were two Dutch gentlemen who, they were older than us, and I had said I came up to them at the end and said "jonges" to them, which means guys, but like technically it means young guys, and they started laughing when I called them "jonges" because they were notably like older guys, but they were super like friendly at the end of the day. We had a great game playing them, and they knew what they were doing. Like they didn't come playing a easy set of lists, right? This was like they came for blood a bit. So this, but what was it? John's list was the KO list, and it wasn't my list. It wasn't the melee version. It wasn't full on Thunderers. It was a unit of 10 Arco, 5 Thunderers sitting in there with a chemist in like a gun hauler that had the engine work, the collapse of compartments. They had a purple sun. They had and a frigate, and then they had an admiral and or maybe the chemist was in I forget who was in there. Maybe it was a navigator, but someone was in the boat with the admiral, or maybe it was an engine master. In any case, the frigate was mainly just teleporting them around or moving them around for most of the game because the Arco never got to step in the boat because I went for an alpha. I was trying to take out his with everything I had in my army, went into the flank that had the gun hauler with the 5 Thunderers and the one chemist who had the spell in the bottle. I was trying to alpha them dead, and all I had to do pretty much to really get it to go off was kill the gun hauler, which only has 10 wounds and has it's a 4-up or 3-up save. I can't remember what it's at right now because it changed. But in any case, I've totally whiffed. Turn 1, I ended up basically losing everything in my army except for my one engine master of 2, who ended up being my little VIP. Do you want to say like what happened here with this guy? Since you find it funny too.
No, but even before that, it wasn't just you. I had a shit magic phase too.
Yeah,
so like
true.
Everything that could have, we decided we're gonna alpha. We're gonna take the turn. We're gonna go against what we think we should do, and it just all went horribly wrong. And we were like, well, we've got some issues here because now you're gonna get slapped back, and slap they did.
Yep.
It was a rough first turn, and I don't think the second turn was much better. But what we were doing is we were the only ones that had GCs parked on the side for the position over power.
Mm-hmm.
So we were still maintaining our point lead, even though we were down in models. And then I had to I filled the middle of the board with my squig herds as much as possible, doing some screens so those boats couldn't move as much as possible. And then when you were down, I I remember it kind of went quiet, and we were both kind of scratching our heads, and I was like, okay, I got it, I know what's gonna happen. And then I was able to get my squigs all the way where they needed to be next to your two heroes, and then it from there that's when it started to slip away from them because we waited until the side objectives were gone so that we could focus on just clearing them out and ride our points lead to the end.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's interesting is it. Well, okay. So one is my little hero guy. He's good in combat, so he just kept doing the heroic action to fight in the hero phase, just so that he could, clean some stuff up. And he kept tying up some of the left flank that they had going on there.
Yeah.
And he just survived the whole time, which was crazy. He got real close to dying, but he was fine. And that could have also been a difference maker for one of those GC tactics. I think we only played 3 full turns of this game, and we talked out the 4th maybe. Or maybe it was 4 turns and we talked out the 5th, but
I think we got to 4 because it was so close. Yeah,
it was super close. And the game-saving thing that happened was, this is for anyone out there playing KO, if you try to do the combat step, the assault thing where you step out of the boat, they had chosen to do battle tactic with GCs on an objective, the one where you have to have 2 on an objective totally outside your territory. His plan was to charge in with the boat, kill this squigs unit that you had that was on the objective, and then step out and have GCs on it. Because the GCs don't count as controlling an objective if they're still in the boat. Well, I had learned this from one of my games with Serbia, but if on the impact you end up killing the unit that you charged into and no one's within 3 inches anymore, you can't actually step out because the guys have to be in combat when they step out. Otherwise, they can't. And so they chose to, you don't have to do the impact hits when the boat goes in. The boat ended up killing that whole unit, and then they couldn't get their battle tactic. And those 2 points were ultimately, we talked it out a little conservatively, I think, when we talked the points out. But if the conservative way that we did decide the points would play out was in fact how it would play out, we would have actually lost by 1 point instead of winning by 1 point. Because of that battle tactic failing. So
yeah,
that was kind of a big, like, they should have gotten it, but it's a subtle thing that a lot of times, read your war scroll abilities. If it says you can do something, there's a reason that it says can sometimes, so that you have a little more control over the sequence of events and stuff. So anyway, that worked out in our favor. And to my point about I was basically out of the game for the back half of the game, if not 2/3 of the game. But Nick and I have a good rapport with each other. We've not only played 3 doubles tournaments together, but we play against each other all the time. We're good friends. We talk about strategy all the time, and we know each other's play styles. We know, we both are tournament experienced, where we have a sense for kind of staying on our feet and not getting too complacent. Yeah, we had our moment where we got down about, I think this one might be in the bag for the other team. They've got this one. But it ended up, Nick played his Gitz so well, you did, Nick, and you knew what you were doing. And then I just tried to pick up the slack and notice things that maybe helps when you've got 2 minds working together and, us being able to really communicate. I was super proud of how well we worked together at this tournament, especially. And really looking forward to the next one, especially after this experience. So it was a tough fight. We deserved to, have a rough matchup for that last one. And the guys were graceful with their very small defeat. They ended up taking 3rd place at the tournament. They were the 2-1 that the top 2-1 army. And I guess we would have taken 3rd place if we had lost by 1 point, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think there was a lot to be said. It was actually almost like foreshadowing, because we talked about on the drive over. You were asking, how much do you think team coordination is going to play into this? People that have done this before, know each other, are really good friends, and we kind of went back and forth. I was like, yeah, I'm sure there's a pretty good element of it. But then, especially like you're saying in that last game, it was massive because, like you were saying, I was really focusing on how to play the Gitz well and doing what I needed to do, and you were really helping a lot in giving me options. So you're like, we could also take this, there's that option. And I was like, okay. And then, so piecing that all together, and you kind of already knew what I wanted to do. And then you were really, really good at keeping your MVP there alive and coordinating so that we could make those things happen, it was really, really helpful versus, someone that's maybe not playing with someone that they're on the same page automatically. So it was really helpful that you already kind of were in my head and vice versa.
Yeah, what's interesting is this video will probably go up after we've had our Team the Netherlands video, and one of the things we talked about was the importance of having a coach on a team. And what we didn't mention in the the world's rules, is that the coach can't just come stand by your table for as long as he wants. The coach has a limited amount of time, right? It's like a timeout kind of thing. And so, what this really felt like was I got to go into free coach mode because I'm supposed to be standing next to you for the whole time. And that's kind of what it felt like for me, which was really fun to switch modes of playing. So and then you just know what you're doing with your Gitz so well that it was kind of like I didn't have to advise how your Gitz played. You knew what you were doing, but
so I think one of the good examples was like I really knew what I wanted to do in the center of the board, but then you're like, also remember you need to keep in range of that boat or it's gonna fuck off. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay, great, thanks. And so then I was able to really maximize the move rather than just do an okay move.
Yeah, and of course, playing a mirror match, it helps because we both know the armies we're up against.
Yeah.
And as they often say, like in mirror match type thing, a lot of times this is going to come down to dice rolls for a priority, or it's going to come down to which side is just more experienced in playing tournaments and or knowing the full rule set. And I think we definitely had that side on our favor. The other two guys were literally also playing top table game. They took third place at the tournament. They were not bad players, but I think we were a little more on top of everything, and that ended up working in our favor. It was so close, though. It was as close as it could be. So
yeah, we really talked it out for quite a while, and the fun part was we were really going back and forth about what would happen. No, this is not possible. That to be possible, and then it kind of dawned on me, and I was like, fellas, we're really spending a lot of time on an extra 2 points, which doesn't change the bracket at all. So maybe we'll just call it here. And everyone kind of went, yeah, all right, we're done. Yeah. And then we moved on. So they knew what they were doing. They were really strong opponents. It was a very tough game, but very fun. It was really rewarding after like putting that much focus and energy into the game, even a casual game, and then to come out barely on top was very, very fun.
Right. So let's look at the kind of conclusion here. If you couldn't tell, we took first place at this tournament, which is my first time ever doing that. I've taken second place at a smaller tournament. Nick's gotten a few of these accolades before, but this was our first time doing it together. It felt really good, especially with all of the hype that was built up to us being the world's guys or whatever. Even though there were plenty of competitive people playing at the tournament as well. And we each got a little gift certificate and, a plaque, and that was nice. Nick, how many other of these kind of plaques and things have you taken home thus far? I can't keep them all straight.
Let me see. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that I can see right now.
And they're all from podiuming, or?
No. I only have 2 from podium. I've got a sportsman, and I've got 2 best in class, 3 best in class.
Okay, right, for being a death army.
Yeah.
When you were playing death.
Yeah, only 2 podiums for playing.
Yeah. But we'll see what happens with Worlds. So there's always that. And then so I've also got here's this art that I was referencing of the Boomthirster going nuts on my. I don't know if this is actually the Boomthirster because he's got the whip, but it might be. But he's going nuts on my boat, so that felt appropriate. Also, really cool art. And then future goals, Nick. Obviously, we could. This is where we usually talk about our singles endeavors. But what are we thinking about double stuff moving forward? What are we gonna do?
Sober second time lesson, I think, is probably gonna want to continue our ridiculous narrative play with Feck and Stormcast and just see where that takes us. Yeah. But drunk us may have another one where we're like, let's just do it again.
Yeah.
Why not? So who knows what happens?
We'll be disinvited. We have to start bringing people beer and stuff, just to ease people over for letting us go.
Or just go in with fake names so they don't know it's us.
Oh wow. What would your alias be?
Let's see. Steven Cumberpatch.
Okay, cool. What would mine be? You're better at thinking on your feet with these.
Oh, Steve, you look like James Thornton.
That's so British. I think I'd have to fuck up my teeth a little bit more.
That's
Yeah.
fine. We're supposed to go with I could go with like Chad Bigsby or something.
Wow.
I know I keep doing like British last names. Hold
Yeah.
on.
Wow. Isn't that like? Yeah, I thought that was a Modern Family alias. From anyway.
Oh yeah, Clyde Bigsby.
Clyde
Yeah,
Bigsby,
you're right.
yeah,
You're right.
right,
I'm
right.
super original. I'm not ripping off anything.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Cool. I
bring
like
nothing
it.
to the table.
Elka calls me Sniffs McDroopy if I'm sick, so there's that. Like we could call
Okay.
Sniffs McDroopy.
It could also be a drug code name too.
Wow. All right. So closing thoughts, Nick. Does this change anything about how much you like doubles? Are you excited for keeping the dream alive? We could be playing in Mechla again, maybe, or although I think we missed one of those because of just things coming up. And then obviously, if AO keeps doing them, does this get you more pumped up for doubles?
I love doubles. I've always loved them. I think they're a lot of fun. So if I have time to do them, I'll always do them. I think there's a lot of cool things that you see in a casual settings that also could have applicability in the singles. So one of the things that we didn't get to mention, now I'm thinking about it, is I actually really liked White Scar's way of score tallying. So it was live, so you could actually see live as scores were coming in and kind of freak out, be like, ooh, if they win their game, we're going to go up against them. So it was like live streaming everybody's scores. I thought that was really cool, actually.
Yeah, definitely neat. And you have more of an eye for the drama of the tournament itself, like pairings and all that than I do. So you were definitely keeping an eye on the possibility that we'd go up against this team or this team, and it was fun watching you get excited about it. I would just ask you what was happening because I wasn't willing to put the energy in. So.
Yeah, we also treated it like it was real as well. As like in our break, it was like, should we go discuss our pairing? We go off in the corner and just break down their lists and talk about the strategy and everything. Like we were playing it for realsies, which was fun.
Yeah, it was really neat. So in closing, thank you to everyone for watching again and keeping up with these tournament reports. I know it's not everyone's favorite format, but we have a good time kind of documenting our AOS journey, and we've heard from a few different other people that these have been inspiring to getting out there and playing their own tournaments and getting a sense for how this goes. And evidently, from what I've heard, there isn't a huge we have a lot of battle reports that exist out there, but we don't have a lot of tournament reports on YouTube, and so it's nice to know that we're maybe filling in that niche a little bit. But in the meantime, guys, thanks again. Feel free to like, share, subscribe, join the Discord, keep the conversation going. Let us know what you think of doubles in general and if you've ever participated in one. And thanks again, Nick, for being on the podcast or the YouTube channel.
Always. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys. Until next time, Ryan out.